Let's talk about one of the trickiest parts of the process to get sponsored: answering sponsorship questions. First, we'll cover how to answer them on job application forms. Then, we'll go over how to handle sponsorship questions in an interview. What you're seeing on the screen is an example of a typical job application. Most of the time, these forms will ask something like, "Are you legally authorized to work in the United States?" And then, "Will you now or in the future require sponsorship for employment visa status?" Here's how we recommend you respond. For the first question, yes, you are legally authorized to work in the United States because you are on CPT or OPT. That shows employers that you are ready to start working right away. For the second question, you would also answer yes because you will need sponsorship to continue working beyond your OPT. Now, here's something important to keep in mind. These questions are often used to filter out candidates who need a visa. That's the reality. But don't let that discourage you. That's why incorporating networking into your sponsorship strategy is so important. It helps reduce the risk of being automatically filtered out. Now, let's learn how to handle questions about sponsorship during an interview. At some point in the interview, you will be asked if you need sponsorship, to which you will answer yes. Then the interviewer will say, "I'm sorry, but we don't sponsor." What do you do then? First, accept the fact that most companies will say no, but because they say they don't, doesn't mean they actually don't sponsor. The topic of sponsorship is often clouded by misinformation. This leads many hiring managers who are not well informed to play it safe and say, "We don't sponsor," without really understanding what sponsorship involves. For this reason, you should understand that no is not the end of the conversation. This is simply your starting point to have a meaningful discussion with your interviewer about sponsorship. The issue that you often face is one of misinformation. Fortunately, this presents an opportunity because you can equip yourself with the knowledge to effectively communicate with potential employers about sponsorship in a way that could shift their perspective. By the way, the best way to answer the question, "Do you need sponsorship?" is to say something like this: "I already have a work permit called optional practical training. If you want to keep me indefinitely, we can easily make that arrangement." The process is simple and requires very little input from you. I have an immigration attorney who handles a significant portion of this. The bottom line question is whether you think I am the best candidate for this position. It's important to note that we're avoiding a simple yes or no response. Providing an absolute answer in this context can be counterproductive. By offering this more detailed response, you clarify you can start working immediately. You also introduce the idea that the process may be simpler than anticipated. And by answering this way, you also show preparedness. By the way, this is precisely the reason why it's so important that you meet with an immigration attorney before you start looking for a job. Now let's learn how to overcome the most common objections to sponsorship. In some cases, the interviewer may firmly indicate they don't do work visa applications. If this happens, we suggest you say, "I understand. I am interested in learning why. Do you have any particular concerns about applying for a work visa?" Once you understand the employer's specific reservations, you can effectively address them. Here's how you can easily address each of the most common objections. The first one is cost. Employers will typically have an inflated view of the cost to complete a work visa application. Many times, their perception of cost far exceeds reality. The reality is that, depending on the process you qualify for, the costs will vary from $7,000 for an H-1B non-immigration work visa to $19,000 for an EB-2 or EB-3 employment-based immigration process. Be prepared to discuss ways to offset the costs. For example, you may consider telling the employer that you are willing to forfeit signing bonuses and/or performance and end-of-year bonuses. Ultimately, don't hesitate or feel discouraged to discuss the costs of your immigration process with an employer. It's important to remember that hiring new employees, American or foreign, inherently involves expenses. Even roles considered low-skilled, such as housekeeping staff, generate hiring costs around $300 to $500 on average. So, you need to start thinking of your immigration expenses as a normal part of the hiring process. The second concern is effort. Hiring managers are busy and they seldom have time for additional responsibilities, like overseeing an immigration process. In this case, perception also tends to exceed reality as immigration processes don't demand a significant effort from the hiring manager. You can respond to objections concerning effort by mentioning that you have an immigration attorney. You can reassure the hiring manager that the process is largely managed by the attorney, requiring minimal effort on their part. The manager's main role is simply to provide the necessary information to the attorney, who will take care of the application process. The third concern is legal and fiscal scrutiny. Privately held businesses tend to value their privacy, especially when dealing with government agencies and disclosing financial information. The idea of sponsoring you can raise concerns about increased government interaction, leading to potential disclosure of sensitive information and the risk of unexpected inspections or audits. While sponsoring an employee does involve some interaction with the government, you can explain that the required disclosures are usually minimal. In most cases, it simply means providing tax filing information, data that businesses already generate and submit to the IRS. This is a type of objection that can also be easily managed by introducing an immigration attorney in the conversation. You can highlight that the entire process will be evaluated by your immigration attorney, so all the steps are safe for the employer and completed legally and correctly. If the employer has any other specific concerns, find documentation that explains the reality. For example, if the employer doesn't think an OPT constitutes a valid work permit, you can print documentation from the uscis.gov website and offer it as proof. You can also reach out to your school's Office of International Students, especially if you need clarification on any documentation that employers might request. They can be a great resource to make sure everything is accurate and handled properly. The fourth concern is that you will leave. Yes, believe it or not, this is a frequent concern among employers. They think you will use their business as a trampoline to become a permanent resident and then move on to other opportunities, or that you will go back to your home country. This objection can be diffused with an employment contract. Many companies offer financial incentives to tie their new recruits for specific periods of time. Be prepared to discuss your willingness to sign such a contract. You can, for example, say that you are willing to sign a 5-year contract with them. The fifth concern is that sponsoring you means committing to an unbreakable contract with you and the U.S. government. Companies fear that once they start the process, they won't be able to terminate your employment if needed. In reality, sponsorship can be stopped at any stage without consequences, aside from any cost already incurred. For better or worse, employers can let you go just like they would any American employee. The sixth and last common objection is having to wait too long. Let's face it, immigration processes can be lengthy, which leads some employers to dismiss sponsorship as an impractical hiring strategy. However, they may not realize that you are available to work right away under CPT or OPT, and that they can navigate an immigration process while you are on OPT, making your employment seamless from day one. To address this, you need to make it clear that you can begin working according to your CPT or OPT start date, potentially right away. This is also a great chance to demonstrate that you have consulted with an immigration attorney and fully understand the timeline for your immigration process. Depending on the situation, walking them through the timeline can help ease their concerns and overcome this objection.